2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but today we are going on about our good friend Dustin's birthday picks. Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about the first film that you had us go and watch for this week?
Hey everybody, so for my birthday month, I thought it could be fun to check out some newer releases since we usually kick back and enjoy more classic films. Well, you know what I mean by classic, more well-known like stuff from the past, like pure winners. But anyway, so I thought it'd be fun to check out some newer movies, and that thing that came out really recently that I was really happy with it was called Totally Killer. So it's only a few weeks old. It's out on Amazon Prime, and it's a slasher movie kind of in the veins of Freaky or Happy Death Day to You. So where it takes kind of a concept from a popular, well-known like mainstream movie and finds a way to kind of massage that into a horror movie. And in this case, this is basically a slasher version of Back to the Future. Whereas, Happy Death Day to You was Groundhog Day, Freaky was Freaky Friday, and I think it's out in theaters now. I don't know if you can see it at home yet, but It's a Wonderful Knife is, well, if you can't figure out what movie that's based on, I feel bad for you. But anyway, so at first I thought this was written by Michael Kennedy, who wrote Freaky and is also involved with It's a Wonderful Knife. But checking up on the IMDb today, it's by a bunch of people I don't think I've ever heard of before. So on Twitter, I think I was being like, wow, great work, Michael Kennedy, and like tagged him and stuff, thinking he was behind this, and it's like, oh, no wonder he didn't say anything. Okay, let's sweep that under the rug. But anyway, this movie was a really fun time. I saw a few people talking about it a couple weeks ago, and I did it as one of my October like holiday watches, and I was really happy with it. Like it's got like a good mix of humor. Like most of the jokes work pretty well for me in this. Like I have a really positive impression of it. Like there's a couple things that are kind of like, yeah, like a little embarrassing, but for the most part, it's great. It has a great soundtrack, including a moment which when we get there, it's in Phenomena, like the Dario Argento movie, there's a use of like an Iron Maiden song that's like really cool in the context of that scene, and there is a song use in one of the scenes in this movie that is about as good, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But I was just so happy with it, and on top of that, like when there aren't a lot of kills, but when they happen, they are nasty. Like they're not like elaborate or anything. It's just kind of like somebody is getting stabbed to death in a realistic manner. Like they beg, they plead, they don't die immediately, and it's kind of like it almost pulls you out of it. So it's a good balance of tone, I think.
The killer's whole shtick is that he stabs them 16 times. So yeah, that's a bit.
Yes, the Sweet 16 killer. John. It was so fun overall. Like especially it takes place between modern day and the past, because in the world of this movie, like the murders happened like 30 years ago. So excuse me, I think it might be a slight cough. I'm slowing my throat down here. So the movie starts off in the modern day, and then our time travel thing happens, and then most of the rest of it takes place in the past. And the way it explores like the way some people approach true crime, like I think was pretty it was kind of funny, but also some like I think good commentary on just kind of maybe some people are a little too into this, because like the killer was never caught, and there are like murder tours where people like the killer had a distinct mask, and people dress up as the killer and go on murder tours. So that right off the bat was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be fun, And I think that first few minutes where it establishes all that information really sold me on the movie and like formed such a positive like first impression of it for me. So, but we're gonna get into the movie as we progress through the plot. So, who's next for first impression? Any volunteers?
I suppose I'll go. I guess this was my first time watch. I had heard some of the buzz about it because a lot of anytime a movie like starts to be like a craze thing, I start seeing like a ton of posts like, "Oh, I just saw this." Oh, yeah, okay. On a line, and then eventually I'll get around to watching the said movie. But I'm kind of glad that you brought it up as a movie to watch, because then I had a chance to actually sit down and watch it and maybe have a thought process on it. And it wasn't too bad. I mean, I like Happy Death Day to You. I have not seen Freaky yet. But I have seen fairly similar movies similar to this. But I like that it took the Back to the Future angle. And had an interesting setup to the premise. And I think the main chick involved in it was definitely very tongue-in-cheek, and knew a lot of modern day stuff, and kind of had the same vibe as Marty, going back to when he met his mom and her her friends and all that jazz. So there were some similar vibes that I could see going on there, um, especially when she put on those gym shorts and she was like, "Oh, damn, I feel like I'm in Hooters or some shit like that," But
yeah, some of that stuff was really fun. I meant to like try to find somebody like in high school and ask, "Hey, do you guys like not have uniforms anymore, or like do you not play dodgeball anymore?" Just a lot of the things that she was noticing.
Well, it was definitely not as what is it war like as that was when I was in high school. So it was more like, okay, you guys go to this line, you guys go to this line, and it wasn't as competitive or mean spirited as that when I was growing up. So I guess that was kind of new.
So the actress's name, her name is Kiernan Shipka, and she was Sabrina in the Netflix Sabrina series.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch that.
Familiar.
So I've been meaning to watch that. I haven't.
It was. I used to watch it. I don't think I finished the last season or two. Because I remember it was something along the lines of I finished season 2, and then it was going to take a while for season 3 to come out, and then I lost track of it. And then by the time I was like, oh yeah, I need to go do that, I had both lost Netflix and there was other stuff going on. So
Yeah.
I need to revisit it. But it was a pretty good show, and she was kind of the highlight. So it's good to see her like back in stuff. Because at first I was like, who is that? They seem so familiar. And well, now we know.
I fairly enjoyed it. So Tammy, did you want to go next?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, it was my first time. Um, yeah, I thought it was neat. I mean, I like the whole concept of the going back in time and everything, and you know, trying to stop the killer and trying to figure out who the killer was and everything, and I guess the whole portrayal of like the mean girls and you know the jocks and the popular people and everything. You know, trying to portray what the '80s were like, which, eh, I guess it was somewhat true. I be, I was born in '72, so you know I was in high school and stuff. In the late '80s. I was in. I graduated '90s, so it's like, yeah, I guess it kind of fit the '80s portrayal. Um, you did definitely have your groups like that. Um, but yeah, it was. I thought it was neat with, like I said, the going back in time, trying to find the killer and everything. So it was fun. It was a nice mix. You didn't just have your plain old horror movie, and you didn't just you know it was a mixture of everything. So it made it entertaining. So
Okay.
Rad.
How about you, Brandon?
Well, this was my first time watching this. I'd never actually seen this film before. I had seen advertising for it, but that was hard not to see advertising for the film. I mean, really. And
I had
I had a hard time getting getting Kim to watch it initially. So when I can't do that, I don't usually watch them very quickly. But I did manage to when Dustin had made this go, because I was able to use it as an excuse. So we sat down, we watched it, and I was very pleased by it. I mean, it already looked like something that was up my alley. I had been curious about Freaky. I actually had no interest in Happy Death Day, but Freaky definitely looked interesting. So this definitely felt kind of cool, with the guy has the sort of Max Headroom looking head, and just the 16 stabs. I thought it was a rather fun one. I mean, a lot of it, we were just sitting back there. It's like, yep, that's how it was in the 80s. Yeah. When she was talking about why don't we do this? And then it's like, they look at her like she's crazy.
Apparently, I looked this up. Apparently, The Mask is based on Kiefer Sutherland and Rob Lowe as teens in the 80s.
right. Yeah, I saw that too, and a little bit of, I guess, was Johnny Quest or whatever thrown in as well.
Johnny Bravo was what.
Johnny Bravo, yes.
Is you can see it.
Yeah,
you can see it. For me, a first impression was it looked like Max Headroom to me, which would be appropriate for the 80s. So,
From the little I've seen of Max Headroom, that is also pretty accurate. So I think the earring was that from Rob Lowe or Kiefer Sutherland? It was from one of them.
Sutherland, because he had an earring like that in Lost Boys.
That's what I was thinking about the Lost Boys.
Because I knew I recognized it from somewhere, but I couldn't figure out where until I looked it up.
Now, one thing that I was happy about is that I was actually able to, like Blackish, I was able to be the first of us both to figure out who the killer was and who the alternate killer was. So it was kind of fun. And it was a fun guessing game. And the fact that I was able to figure it out is good, because I hate when a movie does that and they make it unsolvable, but they make you think like it was solvable. Sometimes the Saw series was guilty of that. So it was kind of fun to have that going. But that's my first impressions.
Okay. How about you, Jake? What were your first impressions?
Well, this was definitely a first time watch. I had heard of the movie, but I honestly would not have probably been one I prioritized anytime soon. So I'm kind of glad I had a excuse to watch it because I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. And I've been trying to think of another instance of a time travel slasher film. I can't think I've seen one. But I did just now think of another example of someone trying to stop a serial killer through time travel. You know, there was that first season of Heroes. So it's happened, but this particular combination of things was fairly fresh and new, I think, in a lot of ways, and so that was kind of fun. I did like the contrast of this person from the modern era seeing how things work. I think they exaggerated the 80s, but I don't think it wasn't so exaggerated that it was I'm sitting there going, no, this is probably just slightly ramped up for comic effect. It's pretty close to what some people's experiences would have been.
It was a
Well,
little
egregious,
exaggerated, yeah.
Yeah,
I do think that if you're looking at it from their eyes,
yeah,
it works out, because from a person from present day's standpoint,
yes,
that's exactly how the 80s would look, in their opinion.
yes, and her commentary on things like where she basically waltzes into school and claims to be an exchange student, and the secretary hardly bats an eye at her. And she's like, are you sure you don't need an ID or something? I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's kind of fun.
What is
What's
this?
that?
Fort Knox? You don't need to verify that, or what is this, Fort Knox?
Right. Or
Or
especially like where her complete the way the cops look at her like she's insane when she gives them a blood sample, and it's like, that's like, to someone in the modern era, that's obvious. You've got blood, that's great, and it's like, no. So yeah, I did like, and you're right, the use of music. Dustin, you were talking about the use of music already. I did think they had some pretty fun usage there. So yeah, overall it was definitely a favorable first impression, and yeah.
Okay. I think that's pretty much everyone. So, Dustin, why don't you bring us into the story a little bit more?
Okay, well, so we start off with some opening narration that sets up the premise. So it talks about the murders that happened in the past, and how the killer became known as the Sweet 16 Killer. And it takes us around the town. Like we see one of the murder tours that there's like a local, I want to say conspiracy nut, but that's not quite accurately what he is. Who has like a really popular podcast on the crimes, and he's leading a tour of a bunch of people dressed in like the killer's like costume, because they make a big point about, the killer wore a costume that was you wore a unique costume to kind of establish, I think, to give him some like identity as like a horror character in his own. And I liked the way that I liked that costume. I kind of want to get that costume, but I don't know anybody who makes the mask yet. And like I was saying in my first impression, we get a bit of the tone of the movie like early on, where it presented very seriously, but kind of told in like an upbeat like tone of voice. And he's leading the murder tour, and he's like, "Yeah, here is the restaurant." And somebody from the restaurant like comes out and offers them like samples. And it's like, I don't know, serial killer, I think more than 3 people killed. It's like, let's hear it for whatever her name is, who wishes there were more people killed. And there's just like an awkward moment.
Mhm.
And so the humor for this is, I don't really know the right word for it. Maybe quirky would be it. But for the most part, it does it for me. Like, I don't like it when things are kind of trying too hard, and this felt very organic with how funny stuff could be. But anyway, so after we get like enough connective tissue, we're introduced to, God help me, I can't remember Nahnatchka's character's name. Jamie.
it's-
It was a joke later. Jamie, I remember now. So we're introduced to Jamie's parents, and they're just they just seem kind of like goofy stock parents for a little bit. There's a particular joke where like they're showing off their Halloween costumes. It's like, I'm Molly Ringwald, and Jamie's like, who? And I mean, I'm old enough to be kind of from that time, and I still always go, who? Whenever anybody mentions Molly Ringwald. So I laugh
well,
pretty good.
and her father is played by someone who has actually played in a slasher franchise before. In I Know What You Did Last Summer, if I remember correctly.
Was he?
Yep. He played one of the jocks when he was young.
Well, her father is Lachlan Monroe, and he has definitely been in some stuff over the years. I recognized him better than probably anyone else in the cast. And I think you might be right that might have been one of the. Let me see what I know him from.
For some reason, oh yeah, damn, I was right. As soon as I saw his face, I was like, I know I've seen that guy in something.
Yeah.
And on a hunch, I just checked. Freddy versus Jason. He's the helpful cop in Freddy versus Jason.
Okay.
Yep, and
He would have to be. Like, the dude has such a.
he was Greg in Scary Movie.
Ah, yeah.
He was Agent Jake Harper in White Chicks.
Okay.
I have never seen that.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff here I've never seen, but I recognize some of the titles. Yeah.
He has a really distinct face. Yeah. He
Yeah.
was in The Predator.
Let's see.
You learn all the information live.
Right. Hansel and Gretel get baked. What? I don't know.
Yeah.
That was a terrible film, but I still enjoyed it nevertheless.
He did have an appearance on Psych. Okay.
I don't know. He does have a pretty like distinct face. So
Yeah.
that helped me recognize him. I don't see. Well, this is a very big list. I'm not going through all of it. So,
Right. Right.
but hey, Freddy versus Jason, you already win in my book. But anyway, he's doing like the dorky like dad thing. It's like, here is my costume, and it's just like a muscle thing like drawn on him.
Yeah. He like claims he used to be like Zac Efron, and the daughter, of course, does the eye roll, like, yeah, right. You know.
Jacked just like him, and like that is. By the way, we are going to spoil like the hell out of this movie.
Oh yeah.
So everyone knows. So you better see it before you listen to this, in case that wasn't clear.
Night at the Roxbury. Oh yeah, okay. I probably recognized him from that. Dead Man on Campus. Yeah.
But, at any rate, that's a really fun payoff. Like that was one of my favorite jokes in this movie. Later on, which I like to think I'm like smarter than being impressed that easily, but sometimes like a simple joke is like, hey, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so her mom like gives her a bunch of she's supposed to be going to a concert kind of by herself, but her parents are like really strict because they were really close to the murders in the past, and the victims were actually like close friends of theirs, so that we get the vibe that the mom is really overprotective of Jamie for that reason. Like she gives her like a rape alarm and like pepper spray and all kinds of stuff, along with like a bunch of like rules for going out. So it's a little bit like
At least to us, it's like
2018. Yep.
You can't forget that she taught her. She took self-defense classes because that'll.
Yeah.
Yes, that's really important
That
too.
definitely comes into play later.
Yeah, and her mom's apparently been taking those classes too, because damn. So after we get this setup where like Jamie's a little bit mean to her mom, like we go off and we meet Jamie's friend who is like she's like a science nerd kind of teen movie like stereotype. Well, maybe stereotype's the wrong word, but the character type, like the inventor, and she's been working on a time machine. I guess we don't quite find that out yet. As I get a few minutes out of order.
Yeah,
but
apparently she's eventually used some of her mother's schematics to, that evidently her mom gave up on like years ago or whatever.
Yeah, her mom was an inventor too, and she was working on this in high school and just kind of put it on the back burner, which is, I think that's a pretty good way to like set up that there can be a machine in both eras so that Jamie actually has a way back. Like, I think some people I saw online kind of complained about that particular setup, but I see no logic in their argument. But anyway, well, I guess I don't want to spoil like everything, especially since I don't remember every second between scenes. But our first big scene is it's Halloween. Like Dad and Jamie are going, so it's just Mom home alone. She's giving out candy to trick-or-treaters, and someone dressed just like the killer shows up, and she's like, "Ha, get out of here." And it turns out it's the killer, like, returned, and we get a pretty wild fight scene. Like, the killer, like, smashes in the door, and Jamie's mom has weapons hidden everywhere. It's quite a battle. Like, I'm honestly surprised the killer manages to get her at the end of that, because she's putting out a lot of damage. Like, was anybody else kind of wowed by that whole sequence?
Yeah, I thought it was cool that she was prepared. There was another one that reminded me of that a little bit, which was the remake of Slumber Party Massacre, where they were like ultra prepared for the killer that time. And I like it that they did. Of course, they were able to turn the tables a little bit easier than she was. Learning who the killer was made it even kind of lamer that she was taken out like that.
It was very much a "how did you beat her" like moment. Like, I mean, I suppose they would have been like the same age, but at the same time, just wow,
Well, yeah. I thought the fight was pretty impressive for what she brought to it. Yes, I was kind of disappointed that she didn't like get a one up on him or whatnot. But if not for killing her, it wouldn't have pushed the daughter to do what she did. Or kind of, sort of.
Yeah, it had to happen for the story to really start, but at the same time, it was just you almost expected like her to win that battle, and that the rest of the movie would be something completely different. Because when I went into this, like I went into it, I had heard it was good. I did not realize it was really like a time travel kind of thing. So I was pretty surprised when she died at the end of that. Especially after this fight where she seems to have the upper hand on the killer almost the entire time.
Yeah, I thought that she was gonna win over him too, because she really seemed to be kicking his ass,
breaking vases on him, like pulling guns out from under the couch, just like all kinds of craziness. Fucking John Wick battle.
Right.
Yeah, she was definitely preparing herself. That was for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I've been afraid of getting murdered since I was 16. She starts kicking his butt. But she eventually loses, and we get kind of, this movie likes to do a lot of fake outs and like kind of playing with tropes, and we get maybe a sense that there are two killers at the end of this, because at one point she's like, the cops are on their way, and he appears to leave, and then very quickly comes in through the back door, like right behind her. So for a minute there, to me, it was, I don't know, I was trying to figure out who the killer could be, and one thing I really appreciated with this was that I could not solve it because it successfully pointed me in the wrong direction. Like, it references Scream's multiple killers, like a couple, at least once. And it gets you kind of thinking that, and there do end up being multiple killers, but one in the past, one in the present, instead of at the same time. So it does a really good job of faking you out.
Yeah, I felt like the first killer, they made it pretty obvious at one point in the movie. At least I thought so, but Kim didn't, because she was swearing up and down that it wasn't him. I was like, he just revealed how he got all that stuff and how he did that. And he had the motive, and he has the height. Because everybody's looking at the red herring, and the red herring didn't look strong enough to fight out of a paper bag. But then again, neither did the other guy, technically.
Yeah, I would say both of the ones who ended up being unmasked during the course of the film were definitely both likely suspects. I'm not sure that I had declared that, oh, it's definitely this one. But both of them, I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, they dropped a lot of clues for both. I had actually guessed the other killer at the beginning, but then I kind of put it in the back of my head, like, nah, probably couldn't be him. And then it came back into my head later on.
Well, I thought the interplay was pretty well done. I mean, I think that's a mark of maybe like a lesser movie where if it's not engaging enough, your mind will start to wander away from like what's happening now to like trying to game out like where you think the plot is going to go. And this kept me engaged the whole time, and I didn't really do that. So, I mean, maybe I could have figured out who the killer was if the movie had been less good, or at least like not as good at keeping my attention. So I can see that, and like with the benefit of like hindsight, looking back, it's like, okay, they were kind of like setting that guy up to be like a red herring. Like I kind of pegged him as a red herring, but I was like, no, it seems like they could maybe. It seemed like the kind of movie where they would set up a red herring and then it would be the red herring after you're like, nah, it's too obvious. And I appreciated that they didn't really do that, which a few movies have, and it's always kind of like, you think you're smarter than me, huh? Which sounds very petty, but you get the idea. But anyway, so we get kind of the standard, I was mean to my mom and then she died scene. And we get some important information from her dad, who like tells her some stories about when they were younger that will end up helping her out with what she's going to end up doing when she travels to the past.
Well, he tells her about that ride that him and his mom were on when they found out that they were pregnant with her too, which was kind of a little romantic, but
it was actually a pretty sweet story. It was like it was good. I liked that. It was really it felt really heartfelt. Like, did anybody else?
And to be honest, if I just want to point out, that ride is like my favorite ride if I ever go to like a fucking a carnival or whatnot, because it always makes me feel weightless whenever I'm like spinning around in it. But
yeah, I think they made the comment that like rides like that were kind of like discontinued. Like, can you still ride that ride? Because they sort of implied that maybe safety standards changing would have shut certain ones down for good.
No, you can still ride those.
I last saw one in 2019, but I haven't been to a fair since then for obvious reasons.
Same.
So, I've made attempts, but time just hasn't been on my side. But yeah, last time I saw one was then, so they were pretty in service back then. So long ago.
Hey, 2019 was actually quite a long time ago, unfortunately. Like, it doesn't seem like it because of I guess just how COVID quarantine shook out. It just feels like the last couple years didn't. It just feels like 2020 and 2021 did not happen. Like, it's I am trying to sympathize here.
I agree.
But anyway, so after we get that story, which is relevant for later, Jamie and her inventor friend are at the old abandoned amusement park, which in the kind of prologue to this, it's explained how the last murder took place there, and it used to be the big hangout, but after that, nobody would go near it, and so it's this rundown amusement park.
Place too.
Hmm?
I think it became a pizza place in the present day.
Oh, I'm talking about the dilapidated park with the rides.
Yeah,
That was just a dilapidated park they were holding their science fair in, which in a way is kind of cool, but in a way is kind of odd too.
creepy.
Yeah, that they would hold it there.
Which actually,
They did make the comment that the principal got it basically.
Yeah.
for free.
yeah. But although when you learn what you learn later on, it actually makes a bit of sense that he would have it there.
And he'd be like, "Yeah, we'll be fine." So I kind of wish we'd gotten a little bit. I mean, if we'd gotten a bit more info, I guess, along the lines of his reaction to the murders, I think that maybe would have given something away. But at the same time, I would have liked to have seen that.
Jake made a comment before we even got on about how he thought it was somewhat funny, but somewhat sickening that they used plungers for hall passes.
Oh yeah. I commented on that while I was watching it. When they attached the hall pass to a plunger.
So now, when I was in elementary school in '87, I don't recall ever having a plunger being used,
Yeah.
but they did usually attach large objects. Ours was a giant wooden key, which is probably not so giant to an adult as it would be to an 8-year-old.
I feel
But
ours
too.
Ours was this big block of wood that was very much overly marked "Do not disturb." It was just a block of wood with a chain and a key or whatnot. That was our hall pass.
Ours was covered in graffiti.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what ours was, because I went to a couple different elementary schools, but I do remember something really big would always be attached to the key so that you couldn't lose it, and so plunger kind of makes some sense to me. I would hope nobody would actually use the plunger while the key is on it, but as something that makes the key hard to lose, it would probably be pretty effective.
I think
All I remember having for a hall pass is the teacher would write something on a piece of paper and give it to you. That's never if I ever even got one. Most of the time, I didn't have one.
They did miss out on one other thing, which was the copious amounts of hairspray coming out of the girls' bathroom. I mean, even in elementary school in '87, it was constant hairspray coming out of the bathrooms. It was,
Yeah.
I still remember that smell, which of course, a lot of that hairspray was banished after the whole ozone layer thing. But
yeah, I remember it was Aquanet was the big thing then.
I don't know if I remember that, but I definitely remember people smoking in the bathrooms. So they didn't like have that one joke of like her getting this ride with someone, and it was like the car was full of smoke at the end. But I don't think they did that with the bathrooms, did they? Huh?
I remember smoking in the bathroom. Oops.
Yeah.
Well, that was going on since my father was a kid, so
It wasn't just for
Of course, she also
just
remembers smoking in the malls.
It wasn't just the boy, smoking in the boys' room, like Motley Crue says. There was plenty of the girls that did it too.
You think it would catch fire with all that hairspray?
The pounds of hairspray that girls would spray in their hair, heck yeah.
Oh yeah, that's that.
Pounds of makeup.
The hairspray of the time was either Rave or Aquanet. I remember.
I heard somebody make the 80s cocaine joke, but I wasn't really alive enough, I guess, to be aware of that in the 80s. But I wonder, I'm gonna give people the benefit of the doubt and assume that like high school students weren't the ones like doing cocaine in the bathrooms. I'm sure some of them were, but I don't know if that was a common thing.
About what the high school students weren't what?
Doing cocaine in the bathrooms. Like I assumed they would be just like smoking. I thought I heard somebody make a 80s cocaine joke. So.
Not the people I hung out with. Everybody I hung out with was more about smoking and not just cigarettes.
Well, that's better. Anyway, moving on. So, Jimmy's friend's science fair project is like her time machine, which she can't get to work, but she's trying to fix up in order to help Jamie like warn her mom, it's kind of like a tender sort of thing. It's like, well, I thought if we could get this working, we could, maybe stop the killer. And pretty shortly after that, they get attacked by the modern day killer. And through a freak accident, like I like how so this is a kind of a fun riff on what Back to the Future did with having its time machine in a car that doesn't work very well. Their time machine here is a photo booth, and Jimmy tries to hide from the killer in the photo booth. The killer attacks her, and he stabs the control panel, and that somehow makes the machine work, and Jamie is sent back to the past, like a few days before the murders. And I appreciated, like, later in the film, when they gave an explanation for that, it's like, well, what exactly happened? Well, the machine didn't work, and then the killer stabbed the panel, and then suddenly it did work. And they're like, oh, I probably needed an extra conductor. And both, like, mom and daughter come to that conclusion when given that information. So I thought that was kind of a fun touch. It's like, oh, yeah, there is an explanation for this. It's not just kind of whatever, like it is in a lot of movies, where it's just like, oh, that worked. Why? I don't know. It just worked. So I enjoyed the effort to explain certain things. And so
yeah, it would have been kind of kooky to have her go back to the past, and people would be wondering, okay, how the fuck did she do it? It would be weird to not have that backstory or a connection. Okay. Oh, that is why, So, but I do like that juxtaposition that showed like how she got to the past and all that jazz. The lightning and all that stuff that was going on.
And then what do we think about our first moment? Like, she comes to grips with, I'm in the past. The time machine worked pretty quickly. So how do we feel about that whole sequence where she's just kind of wandering around at the suddenly like heavily populated like formerly abandoned amusement park.
Well,
Thought, Brandon, Jake?
Well, I mean, again, they do a pretty good job. I think this was one of the this was one of the areas where music was prominently featured. She walks into, she really does, it seems straight out of the 80s. And, of course, it takes her a couple minutes to take it all in. But yeah, it's definitely a little different from the scene she left behind.
And yeah, there was a couple that came up to the photo booth like right after she got out, and she was like, "Oh, hold on a moment, this is out of order." But I think she took the being back in the past rather well for what it was. It's just she didn't entirely realize the what is it, the talk of the 80s, because she definitely does not sound to others like a very interesting person.
Sounded very contemporary, and they were kind of when she interacts with like other high school kids, like later on, they're kind of like, I think she comes off kind of like stuck up almost to them, because they're like, "Why are you so tense about that?" Yeah. Like she comes up with a pretty good lie that, "Oh, I'm from Canada," and at some point, somebody's like, "What part of Canada?" Prince Edward Island. It's like, "Oh, I've been there for the summer. How did you like it?" And she's just kind of like, eh. So that was one thing I liked about her character, was that she can kind of think on her feet and like come up with excuses for things, but she's not some sort of like perfect genius. And like people buy what she says, but it's not necessarily like the best thing she could have come up with. I don't know if anybody else appreciated that as much. Because I mean, like Marty is awkward in Back to the Future, but some of his cover stories make a bit more sense, at least. Anybody else kind of feel that way sometimes?
Well, yeah, I think she just it kept taking her a moment to realize, oh wait, they don't have this here. Oh wait, they don't have this here. She'd say something or do something and then realize, oh wait a minute, So it was taking her a little bit to remember things, so that she didn't, I think when she came up with the whole psychic thing, I think in a way that kind of helped, because how was she to explain all this stuff, otherwise?
Yeah, I thought that was a good shorthand, because from the first scene with her mom, it's like, "Here, this is the crystal from a psychic. It'll help protect you." Like it's established that like her mom does believe in that kind of thing already, and so it just felt like a good way to like, kind of shorthand that. Okay, she'd buy and trust that, sure, without having to really go into it, because she does try to explain a few times to just random people like what's happening, and using Back to the Future like as a reference for in this movie based on Back to the Future. Like it could, in a lesser movie with like worse writing, I think that could have been really annoying, but here it worked like perfectly. It's like, well, have you seen Back to the Future? No, but I heard it's good. Damn it.
Right. Of course, when she tries to use Scream, and I think there was one other reference, she's like, "Oh yeah, you wouldn't have seen that yet."
And she definitely almost called her mother several times. And
Yeah.
and
Gives her the pet name Mamacita because she can't just keep saying mom.
Like every time she says mom, she tries to like play it off like that, and it's
Yeah.
just like, oh man, it's so awkward. Like
Yeah.
it's funny, but oof, you feel bad.
And then her and her dad, too horny, too early right now. Too.
Yeah, that's too horny, too early. Now, of course, she she has the interesting talk about awkward. Like when she first sees her dad, she totally has the hots for him, and then she's like, "Wait a minute, Hughes? What?
That's Blake Hughes?"
Yeah."
And it like flashes to like, her dad is indeed just as jacked as he claimed to be, maybe more so.
Yeah.
She first sees him like getting out of a pool.
And then
like,
at the end, where she, again, we'll have spoilers, but like where she meets her new family member at the end, and it's like a reprise of that scene. And it's like, she's going to be seeing a psychiatrist at some point in the future.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting how rude she finds her mother to be.
Yeah.
Well, she was one of the mean girls, technically.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not the way that her mom like came off to us at first as,
Well, we eventually find out that her mom was kinda, sorta the least horrible of the four, but they're still, they were pretty bad.
So her mom's introduction is great, like, because after she like gets established, like, and after she goes to the school and gets established, like we did mention earlier that scene where it's like, you don't need to like check anything, or it's like, you're late for gym. You don't want to see my ID, or is this Fort Knox? Get out of here. Okay.
Right.
And she meets her mom like in gym class, and I don't know why, but just that introduction to her mom, like her mom just like cracking her in the face with that dodgeball. You're out, bitch. It's like, oh, okay.
Hi, Momsy.
Kind of suspected her mom would be like this, but it's still quite a fun payoff.
Yes, indeed. Mom was good at playing the mean girl.
Right.
Now that little bit of dialogue, like, but Pam is nice. Are you kidding? Pam's the Wicked Witch of Vernon. Yeah.
Now I have to admit, and maybe I am not as schooled in John Hughes films as I should be. I need to see more of them. And the main thing I think of when I think Molly Ringwald is The Stand. So I don't really have the frame of reference they're using here, 16 Candles and all that kind of stuff. But was Molly Ringwald, she wasn't the bitch character usually, right? Wasn't she normally like the nice girl?
Not in Breakfast Club.
Okay, well,
she was stuck up in that one.
Okay, so maybe Breakfast Club was their model for behavior. I don't know, but it's interesting that the Mollies. It's interesting to me that the Mollies were these horrible
Molly Ringwald lookalikes.
Well, their behavior doesn't sync up with what I usually think of when I think of Molly Ringwald. Do you know what I mean?
No, 16 Candles. She was a bit. She wasn't total B, but she was.
Okay.
But she could be when she wanted to be.
I still need to see those, I'll admit. And I do know that. Yeah, I do know that her character in The Stand was definitely not innocent either. But again, that came later. But I just found that kind of an interesting thing that they had chosen that to be their role model. And wasn't it like at the big party, like they each dressed as a Molly from a different John Hughes film or something like that? I think was their plan there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we had our mom, doing that like Molly Ringwald bit in the beginning, and it's like, oh, okay, that makes a good amount of sense for her.
Yeah.
For her now. Whereas before it felt almost like just kind of like a toss in like 80s reference, but it's like, oh, okay, this actually had some significance to the character.
Yeah, it's like, aren't you wearing a costume, Mom? And she's like, I am. I'm Molly Ringwald. And yeah.
Yeah, the only thing is she's been Molly Ringwald since she was sweet 16. So,
Right.
but
yeah, that was. I think we already commented earlier on just the being surprised at the existence of dodgeball, which I would think in like 2023, like you would still know what that is, like even if they maybe don't play it anymore. I mean, we did dodgeball back in like, 2007 still, so it doesn't seem like it would be like phased out that quickly. But I mean, I do really have no idea. So
Probably
Dodgeball,
depends on where you are to a degree.
dodgeball in the 80s wasn't quite that horrid. At least not in my school growing up.
No, we definitely had it, but it definitely wasn't. Yeah, like you said, it wasn't that bad. But I do know there were definitely people that dreaded it regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had coaches kind of like that.
Oh yeah, we had coaches like that. That wasn't, the issue was kids weren't really trying to. I mean, you would have occasionally one to do it. In high school, we got rid of dodgeball, but in elementary school, we played it all the time, and
Oh yeah,
you didn't see kids do it that crazy. But then again, you never know.
yeah, whenever they show dodgeball in old movies and stuff like this, like they always act like the balls were like really hard and stuff, and we had kind of like cush balls almost.
I was eaten by those red balls, and it would hurt. It would sting.
Oh yeah,
it wouldn't it wouldn't put blood on you typically, but it would definitely sting.
It depends on who's throwing them and how well they're throwing them and whatever. It's definitely not like Rip Torn throwing wrenches at you, but it still was pretty.
Yeah, we had those.
I remember our balls were like black, and they were like kind of like this like foam. Like they weren't very heavy at all. They were kind of hard to throw because they were so light, honestly.
Yeah, we later schools that I had those type of balls, but originally we started out with the red rubber bouncing 4 square balls that you would typically see in outdoors, but they would use them indoors and for dodgeball. So if you got hit by one of those, it would just smack you, and it depending on who played it, it could be a little bit rough, but not as rough as I saw here. So
I seem to remember that they wouldn't be inflated fully. They wouldn't be inflated to where they were rock hard.
Ours were. Ours were.
They were mostly inflated. They wouldn't bounce right if they weren't inflated.
It was our basketballs that weren't as inflated, which I think when we played basketball, that made it tough to dribble them.
No, I remember the red balls they would still bounce, but they weren't inflated to where they were super hard. They would just, I don't know. I didn't play dodgeball that often. Yeah.
Right.
But I remember when we played it, how we whipped them. We whipped them, and we whipped them on whoever we wanted. We weren't nice.
No, I was kind of the same way, actually. But I don't think I ever made anybody's nose bleed, though. So, yeah, that's a fun like character interaction with her mom. Get off the court, bitch! And she just keeps throwing balls at her. So, anyway, so just after after enough setup, like we get to the party, which is where the first murder happens. I mean, that's where she meets like her dad and like all that stuff happens. And we're introduced to, we're introduced to the teen versions of like the gym teacher and like the sheriff and the principal from like later on.
Before that, she went back to the secretary at the front desk to try and find her best friend's mom, the teen version of her. And that was the same thing. Like, she went in ready to give her all this information and excuse it. And it's like, oh, she's in this room. Really? Okay. And she goes and pulls her out of class and tells her about the time. And she believes her immediately. She's like, oh, how you know about my notebook?
Yeah, that was a pretty easy convince. That was a pretty easy sell.
Right. Well, it's like she said, something like, you don't start messing around with time travel without thinking about the possibility that you may get a visit from someone in the future. It's like, yeah, well, it's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty clever because it made like perfect sense, but it was still something I'd never really thought about before. And it's like, oh, well, okay, yeah, I get you. So like, I really enjoy when movies kind of answer my own questions,
Right.
or like things I have, or like just stuff that comes to mind that it's like, hey, wouldn't this be a problem? It's like, here's why that's not a problem. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I like it where it helps do that, and this did it kind of just the right amount of stuff like that.
I do like how at the party, she just kept coming back to the party, and she got like put outside twice almost.
Yeah, the first time the kid who grows up to be the gym teacher, is it Randy? Is it Randy or Rudy? I think it's Randy.
I think it's Randy.
Yeah, like Randy throws her out once when I think Tiffany asked him to throw her out. And then the second time when she gets back in, Randy's like, okay, let's go. And she uses the self-defense stuff on him and just like tosses him across the room. It's like, why couldn't you do that the first time? So, I mean, it is a bit of a trope with like younger versions of like stiff characters being like a lot more loose, but here they were actually pretty fun as different versions of themselves. Like the principal is still kind of like dorky, and the gym teacher is, I mean, he was saying stuff that made him already kind of not sound particularly bright in the future. Like they were at like that safety rally, and he was trying to sound smart with that slogan. It's like, avoid the knife, keep your life. And he felt that was like really profound. And it's like, idiot. But
the sheriff's daughter was definitely a stoner.
Yeah, it's like they were definitely the same guy, just maybe a little like more chill. Whereas the sheriff's daughter was like completely different. Like she was all chill and just not like strict and bitter. From it implied that was because like her dad couldn't solve those cases. She kind of took it on herself to try and solve those murders, and it just kind of like made her into a hard ass over the years. So that was the feel I got from that. Wow, we are really rambling here.
Well, in the I'm not 100% sure if they got this vibe that it had been the case, but definitely in this altered timeline, she was kind of one of the, I'm not sure about top suspects, but she definitely felt like she was under suspicion just because she was a stoner and a slacker, that, and so that probably made her a little bitter too.
Well, she was kind of a daddy's girl because every time she went to her daddy, she was like, "Daddy, I didn't do it. I know you didn't."
Yeah, there was no nepotism there.
Yeah, they were pretty obvious with that too. Which I mean, that was another like she was one of like the many red herrings in this movie that like feel like a viable, like not forced red herring. Because for a few scenes I was like, maybe could have, yeah. I mean, it was a bit of a stretch to see her, beat up like all the dudes that we see the killer beat up. But aside from that, I could have bought. I was kind of buying that she could have been the killer too. But anyway, I guess let's try to pick up our pace and get along to our first murder. So Tiffany was the first person murdered in the past, and so Jamie is kind of trying to stop that, but she gets tossed out again.
Yeah, miss. I don't do blowjobs. You pee out of that thing, which becomes a running gag. Sorry.
Oh no, it's totally fine. That was a pretty crazy running gag that they did. Like it took me a minute to realize that it was a running gag though. Because there were like wine coolers that they were talking about, and I missed that there were those wine coolers that the Mean Girl group liked that were abbreviated like BJ's, and I kind of missed a little bit of that dialogue the first time. So, I mean, I think that was the point, like to get you mixed up because that's the joke. Like she's on the bed with the guy, and it's like, I need to use the bathroom. Too many BJ's. Well, I hope there's room for one more. Ew, no.
You pee out of that thing.
Right.
And that was like that was like a running deal breaker for like multiple people. Like they would just comment on that like casually.
Right. Well, like at one point, I think they were talking about that, and one of them said something like, just think, if she would only go down on him, she'd still be alive, or something like that. And then Jamie's something like, let's not let that be the lesson here.
Like, she was, they would have been together if she said she doesn't do blowjobs, and then so he left. If maybe she did do blowjobs, maybe she'd still be alive. Let's not have that be the lesson. Oh, okay.
Right.
It's like it's almost it's a stupid thing to say, but at the same time, it's like when the guy says it like that, it's like, okay, you can kind of forgive him a little. He's like, oh well, yeah, I understand that was dumb.
Yeah, but I can understand why he was suspected at first, because he had a cruddy van. She noticed that he was drawing stuff in her lab class the one day, and she started asking questions about him. And then when she finds out that he's just kind of, more of a cooler person than you think.
He's just kind of a loner. He's not like a school shooter killer kind of type, even though they sort of paint him like that as another one of their red herrings at first. But anyway, we gotta get through Tiffany's murder at the party here. So in the opening dialogue where it explains like the murders that happened in the past, this is where we first get like divergence from Jamie's interference. So originally Tiffany was killed in the garage. This time she's killed in her parents' room. And it's kind of a neat thing to have somebody like stabbed on a waterbed, because you don't really see waterbeds anymore. And I don't know, it's during the stabbing they were having like blood and water kind of flying everywhere, and I felt that kind of like played up the violence, just like the spurting fluids and stuff everywhere, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting.
Cool.
I miss waterbeds. I do wish that I if they weren't such a terrible thing for your back, which darned if they weren't. They were one of the worst things for your back ever, but damned if they weren't cool.
Yeah.
Kind of nice for a bit, but they were so easy to like poke a hole and like way
Yeah.
too easy. I think that was probably like the biggest problem with them. Because you
The
could
Right.
thing also, they were supposedly good for you and good for your back. Well, that's what the whole selling point was supposed to be for them. And it really, I had one myself, so no, not really. I mean, it was fun
Very
while it lasted.
It was kind of cool. Like you felt like you were on the ocean or something. I had a relative that had one. So
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I think one of the relatives used to babysit me when I was like super little, had a waterbed, and it was fun to kind of like bounce on, but it was still like super breakable. Like I didn't break it, but like I could tell how easy it would have been to do if I wasn't careful. So, but anyway, so Tiffany is stabbed like a bunch of times in the bedroom on the waterbed, and the guy she was with,
It's Eddie Royal.
yeah, Eddie Royal. So in the beginning, we see a poster of him like for like a heavy metal band,
Yeah.
and after that happens, the poster in the present changes because we do like move back and forth between like the past and the present. And like his heavy metal poster is suddenly this like, I don't even know what genre that was supposed to be.
They said that he was sort of like an emo goth rocker now or something like that. But the band's name, what was the band's name originally? I forget. But he changed it to A Waterbed Away, which is kind of a dumb name for a band. But later on, they were like, "Well, what?" Someone asked him about it, and he's like, "Because that's how close he came to death." Oh, I think it was in the that might have been in the end credit, the explanation notebook. Somewhere they said that he said that was how close he came to death.
It's the closest he's ever been to death, was just a waterbed away. If he'd been in the waterbed too, maybe the killer would have got him. And we later learn we eventually learn why the killer is after these particular people. So I think he probably would have been okay. But at the same time, I mean, they wouldn't know. So why wouldn't you believe that?
Yeah, especially because she was the first victim, so there was no pattern to work from. Yeah, no one. If someone comes in the room with a knife, he ain't gonna know shit about whether they're after him.
oh yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna take chances if I see something like that going on. It's like, yeah, he might not have any issue with me. Well, let's see let's find out.
Let's try our luck.
He seems trustworthy.
I mean, look at that mask. You're like, that's a great mask. How could he be bad?
He's smiling. You don't smile when you're gonna kill someone, right?
Let's see.
But anyway, that does establish that what's happening in the past is affecting the future. Like it is making changes, and the movie has a really interesting way of handling that. And like it explains that everything is happening kind of at the same time, and so that's why the past the present like updates with the past as Jamie like changes or alters events.
Well, like one interesting thing was the where the Chris, I think his name is, the podcaster, is in the present talking to the best friend Amelia, and he's like, Tiffany was killed in her parents' room, but on my podcast I said that she was killed in the garage, and now I know I didn't make a mistake, so that was kind of like one of the things that he was trying to jibe what he had done with, like, why, which is kind of interesting that it was like an incremental change that something like that would happen, but
right, like in maybe a little bit more time, like the podcast episode, like dialogue would have been different.
Well, I think, wasn't it the friend who came up with the explanation of people having kind of vestigial memories of alternate timelines or something like that?
Yeah, she used it as it was an explanation of deja vu. For her.
Yeah.
Which, again, was something I thought that was a pretty clever way to kind of get around some of these like script writing problems, because when you're doing something like this that has a lot of moving parts to keep track of and a lot of rules to track, like I think they handled that pretty well. I mean, I was looking at IMDb, and apparently there are like a handful of like goofs. It's like because at the end we get like a "Where Are They Now" montage, and there was something to the effect of, well, if this hadn't happened, she wouldn't know who that guy is. So then why would it be necessary to like mention him in like that montage, like which is presented as like a document she's reading? And I think that if that can be like the worst of our problems with something that's kind of complicated and interwoven, like I think I'd still call that a pretty big success.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. I think overall, I mean, that's one of the tricky things generally when you have time travel as a plot device is one, there are so many differing opinions on how it should work. But also, yeah, as I think someone just used the term, I think Dustin, you just used the term, a lot of moving parts, basically. Yeah. You're right. And like there are so many moving parts that this is not the kind of story you can just dash off and be done with. It requires a lot of going over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure you catch everything and make sure it all syncs up. And so anytime you have a movie that does a pretty good job of it, yeah, okay, they did a pretty good job of it, Gotta give credit where it's due, right?
Exactly. So plus, I think sometimes people maybe get unrealistic expectations, because
well, some of those commenters just like to, they just want to go on there and say something nasty. That's unfortunately a lot of times when you get comments of any sort, it's because people just felt like doing that.
Yeah, a lot of times it's like, well, does this make sense? This doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, it makes sense in the context of the movie and with the explanations they gave for why that happened in the movie. So I don't know what the issue is, which, I mean, I know some of you didn't like next week's movie, but I was seeing kind of a lot of that. It's like, well, why wouldn't they know this? And it's like, I don't know. A lot of movies use pretty much that same type of storytelling. I don't know why it's suddenly a big problem here. But anyway, so I guess that just kind of is a bit of a rant on, like how this film like resolved pretty well. Kind of hopping off from that moment where things do start changing in the present. But there is a fun joke there too, where they're looking at crime scene photos, and Jamie left a note, stab the machine.
Yeah.
As a note for her friend. It's like, oh, I must have needed an extra conductor in the panel.
Right.
So,
I like the idea that she just wrote her initial there. I guess she was trying to be cryptic so she wouldn't change history or whatever. But everyone's like, it's some sort of demonic rune or whatever.
It's a demonic rune. It's a J. It's obviously a J. God, you're stupid.
Everything was demonic back in the 80s. Actually, the late 80s, especially with the Satanic Panic.
Yeah, the Satanic Panic was, man, what a crazy time period.
One of these days, we're gonna cover a WNUF Halloween special. That one really felt like a throwback to it was a throwback, and that one really did an amazing job of showing the Satanic Panic and how crazy things were back then.
I love the WMUF special. Like I'm
Satanic Panic just turned into cancel culture. That's all.
I guess you could say that. I'm kind of low key like internet friends with the writers and director of WNUF, and like those guys are awesome. Like it's such a great like work. But anyway, I could have sworn we covered that. Well, at any rate, so we move on to. So Jamie kind of clues her mom and her mom's friends into it's like, yeah, I'm psychic, and there's going to be a couple more murders, and yeah, as much as the girls have been just like nasty to her, this kind of snaps them out of it to some extent. They don't take her. Well, the second murder really does, but they actually start listening and like being around her after the first murder.
Mom starts
the
others.
don't take it seriously until the second murder, but it's kind of a start, you know.
Yeah, well, at least it's psychics. Psychics are very well believable, but I think that crystal was a good trigger for her to believe it was a psychic.
Yeah, and that was another fun callback too. It's like a psychic gave me this crystal once, and it's like, you know, that's, you know, it was her. That's where she got it. So it was already, I guess it was already kind of set up. Like, I wonder how that would connect to the original timeline. Well, I don't know. If you're asking that question, you're probably creating some problems for yourself. Yeah. But anyway, the next murder is supposed to take place at a cabin in the woods.
As you do.
As you do indeed, yes. And so Jamie's like she's not doing a very good job of like trying to like talk them out of it. It's like, you don't want to go to a cabin in the woods. You want to, and she slips like who her dad is. And it's like, I end up with Blake. It's like, no, not yet. And then we get that like running joke of, leave room for Jesus. She actually says to them a couple times.
Right. Or as I think someone else already pointed out, she kept saying, too horny, too soon.
Yes.
Too horny, too soon.
She used that a lot.
Yeah, I mentioned that because that becomes a big thing.
Yeah, like her parents in the present even mentions like, yeah, it's a good thing we didn't get back together back then, because we would have definitely like broken up. We were not ready. It's like, oh, so that's why she's trying to keep it from happening.
So I guess in the end, with what we find out at the end, I guess maybe surviving a crazy murder spree together the way they did in this iteration, maybe that allowed them to keep on that path.
I think they grew up a lot faster because they were involved with like actively like hunting the killer, and it made them take life a lot more seriously a lot sooner. I think, like that was almost said in dialogue. I think, at the very least, it was pretty strongly implied that they were not like the most together like as teenagers, just in terms of like being able to prioritize or just kind of take things seriously. And so it kind of made them grow up quicker, having this coordinated, can we save our friends from the killer? And also I think that might be something to do with just how they adjusted to normal life after, because like mom was like really paranoid that she would be next someday, or at least with it resolved, in that time period, they got the killer. Like, she didn't have to be like, is he out there coming after me anymore? Like, I think that changed their perspective a lot too. So I don't know, there's kind of a lot of layers to how like the adult versions of them were altered by Jamie being there and kind of coordinating them as a group to look for the killer. What were you saying, Dave?
Oh, saying her mom definitely seemed more prepared than most for not having Jamie as a guidance back in the 80s at this point in time, you know. So one wonders how she got to that point, you know.
Right. And well, moving on to the cabin murder. Like Jamie's trying to convince them. He's like, "Oh no, don't go to the cabin for your birthday. Go. We could go to my parents' condo. Yes, go to the condo. Go do that."
Fall asleep.
And she falls asleep, but she wakes up at the cabin, and it's like, "No, no, no! What are we doing?" It's like, "This is my parents' condo. This isn't a condo. It's not." And like, honestly, kind of dumb. It's like, on the one hand, like you feel bad that they're going to be killed, but on the other hand, they're kind of. I almost want to use the word insufferable, but I don't know. They are, except for like Marissa, like the last one, they're not painted as. I almost said people were saving, but that's kind of fucked up.
Intelligent.
Yeah.
Let's hide behind the wall of chainsaws.
They probably would have thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, and the guys show up to the cabin along with like Stoner Girl. It's like, "I brought brownies." Yeah.
I hope you brought it. I'd never leave without it.
That kind of leads to like one of my favorite jokes. Like all the kids are just like sitting around like drinking and smoking like at the table, and Jamie's like, "This is happening. We're in the murder cabin. We are in the murder cabin. It's happening. We're here." And she's like kind of trying not to freak out, and like the girl's like, "Murder cabin, woo!" Like, what are you doing? Like, it makes I mean like. I can't. When Heather gets killed in the cabin later, like it is like a really nasty, like brutal death, but at the same time, you almost feel like less bad about it, just because it's like, well, look at how they're, they've been warned repeatedly, and they just are like, yeah, whatever, and it's like, I mean, you were kind of told about this, like, damn it, guys. But anyway, so we get a bunch of kind of hijinks I won't like spoil at the cabin. Like eventually Jamie gets kind of thrown out for basically being no fun. It's like like that line from Randy, "Enjoy your trees, bitch." Like, hey, where's Jamie? It's like, oh, she's outside. Should we let her in? It's like, no, she's from Canada. She'll be fine.
You know what the sad thing is? I was like, you know what? He annoys me. He can die. But actually, a lot of them I really couldn't have cared less about. But I understood where the main character was coming from.
Yeah. And they do some kind of playing around with, they have some of their like potential suspect characters kind of disappear at this point. Like we later find out, where they were and what they were doing. It's like, they freaked me out. I was hiding in a closet, and it's like, sure you were. But that's, I guess, never. My throat is kind of going. So I think I'm talking a bit too much. But anyway, so this kill is kind of my favorite sequence in the movie. Just because, like I mentioned, like it has that song where like the killer like pops out of a closet at Heather and like let the music play by Shannon, who I'd never heard of, but I had heard pieces of the song, but I had no idea like who that like that 80s artist was. And fun thing that I noticed like later on after watching this a couple more times, so Heather is wearing like a hat like Shannon is wearing in like the album cover for this song. Did anybody else catch that? Like looking at the old album art for whatever album Let the Music Play is on, like Shannon is wearing like this little like kind of like boxy hat and we see Heather wearing that hat when we're like introduced to her. Did anybody else catch that?
No.
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 Well, dang. I thought that was kind of a funny like tie-in, but yeah. At any rate, so like she's like trying to fight back against the killer. The killer's like throwing her around, like stabbing her, is like tossing her over the stairs, and like the lyrics of the song are like, "Let the music play, you won't get away." It's like I laughed kind of hard at that because I really like it when movies do like kind of goofy stuff like that. Like No One Lives Forever in Chainsaw Massacre 2 is my favorite movie scene maybe ever from all genres. So whenever there's like a clever use of like music with lyrics, I really appreciate it. And like the killer does get Heather here, like, and like the stabs, like they sound like they hurt, and it's really like kind of grim, while this like cheerful, upbeat song is like playing in the background. And a lot of movies have done that before, but usually it's kind of like, I see what we're doing here. Whereas here it was like, yeah, this works. Wow, this is nasty. So I think I got a little bit more out of the scene for that reason, like how it was kind of tastefully done, if that could be said. And then pretty much everybody else in the cabin shows up and tries to like fight the killer. Like Blake gets stabbed, and thankfully he's not too badly hurt. Yeah. There is kind of a moment where it's like, oh no, did she just get her dad killed because like they wouldn't listen to us?
Yeah, it kind of felt that way for just a bit.
Yeah, he disappears for a little bit, but he comes back with some bandages on for like the last scene. So it's like, oh, okay, good. And like we get another fight sequence with her mom like trying to battle the killer, and her mom doesn't do as well this time, but her mom actually seems to get some shots in. Like she breaks yet another vase over the guy's head. Like our killer like takes like 3 people out though in this, like the whole family of them kind of fight him as a unit, and he just knocks them out like one by one.
Yeah, the killer is quite non-stoppable for a moment.
Yeah, he's very tough in like the scenes where he like gets physical and like
resilient.
Yeah, he's not the kind of killer who like he can be hurt. Like she does like crack him in the nose, and we see a bunch of blood pour out of his mask.
Mm-hmm.
So he is like mortal, but he's pretty relentless. It's kind of hard to put words.
We did learn that he took, what did he say, 8 years of karate?
Yeah, he had 8 years. The character said he had 8 years of karate, and that's kind of a tell early on that like, oh, this guy could be a suspect, because we've seen how good the killer is like in hand-to-hand combat situations. But at the same time, the character presents himself as so like nerdy and unassuming. It's like, even though he said that, we almost never would have like pegged him as the killer, or at least I didn't. Like I kind of forgot he was there a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, the last time that we saw him do anything was he got them over the fence, and then you saw him outside at the party, and he was like, "Oh, well, at least it wasn't like you were ditching me."
It's like, yeah, I felt bad that you didn't like help me get in too, but then it turns out you were just being bullied, so it's okay. It's like, oh,
yeah,
like that I feel bad for you and me. But anyway, we get our like police station scene. It's like, I bet you're the killer. I bet you're the killer.
Yeah.
And yes, one of those nice little bits where the sheriff is just like, oh no, you're good. Yeah. like his little girl can do no wrong. Yeah.
Daddy, they didn't. They said I did this. It's like, oh no, she's
Yeah.
fine. She definitely didn't do it.
And that, incidentally, her old man is played by Randall Park, who I've seen in a few things. I think he was in WandaVision, if I'm remembering correctly. Am I?
Yeah, he's like the annoying agent.
Yeah, and he's usually kind of fun. So he was playing a little bit of a dick in this one, but you know, it's
He's a pretty funny dude. Like I like that guy.
yeah.
She's like, here you go, and she hands him like the blood-stained like cloth that she.
What's this?
It's
Right.
the killer.
You
DNA.
can run this through your database. And it's like, what do you mean? The DNA database. The DNA. Yeah, I don't know what it means. You know, it's like
In 1987, they didn't know what DNA was.
I don't think they knew what a worldwide database was.
Well, and DNA was discovered in the 60s, so they would
Yeah.
know what it was. I don't necessarily know if it was really used for crime fighting yet.
Right.
So, you know, he
You
even
want
gets
you
the
to-
name wrong, DMA. Like, what?
Well, and also this far before the net, the idea of a global database definitely would not have been a thing. I would think maybe they probably would have been able, and if these guys were more willing to take these girls seriously, or take Jamie seriously at least, he might have been, well, okay, well, I can send this to someone, and it might be a week or two before we hear anything, but but he just he takes it and just tosses it on the floor, like, you know.
Let's get serious. Throws it away. It's like, damn. Yeah, that was pretty funny too.
It does say that the first DNA testing was first used in 1986, so it was still brand fucking new, like the year before.
Yeah, they wouldn't have heard of it then. You get the impression him and his guest deputy were not the most studious of law enforcement types.
Yeah, it's kind of like that small town cop thing where it's like, I'm gonna do like just enough of my job and like not get too crazy with it.
I'm gonna sit in this chair and act like I'm doing something.
Well,
Over to my deputy.
so
Go check on this for me.
they were pretty complacent. Like when Jamie first came up to them and said, "There's going to be a murder," or something like, "I want to report a murder," or whatever. It's like he almost laughs at her. He's like, "There's no murders here." It's like, you know, it's definitely one of those sleepy little hamlets where nothing ever really goes too wrong, you know, other than people dying in alcohol-fueled crash.
Murder doesn't happen
Yeah.
here.
What's that?
We're all perfect human beings.
Right. I mean, the whole thing that happened with Fat Trish, of course, ends up being central to the entire plot. But that was also an interesting sort of a look into the difference between. I'm pretty sure even in the 80s, driving drunk was frowned on, but nowhere near to the level it is now. But like the whole idea of the guys were trying to say that, well, she died because she's a girl and not because she was drunk.
Yeah.
Kind of like, and the one guy's like, I drive better drunk. And I'm like, oh my God, I know people who think this.
I've heard that plenty of times, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate that I've heard that as many times as I have. And I've heard that in the early 2000s.
I've heard I drive better when I'm drunk. I've heard I drive better when I'm stoned. I've definitely heard some interesting theories that people have had.
At least it's sold out right away. Like, no, you don't.
I work at a job where probation tends to send me DUI violators. So I hear that a lot more than I should be. So many. Yeah, that car, he was moving while sitting still. That's why I ran into him, not because I had 10 beers.
Right.
Actually, my favorite so far is one where a guy thought that he was doing fine because he only drank at the stoplights. Therefore, he was never drinking and driving.
Wow.
Wow.
That's new to me. That's a thing.
Now, granted, you're not as distracted while driving if you only do it at the stoplights.
That is true.
But I'm pretty sure that at that point, the effects of the alcohol arguably are going to be more important than the effects of not having both hands on the wheel. Arguably, at least. But
well, anyway, though, so we've gotten like bits and pieces of that like drunk driving story with what happened with Trish, or well, they call her Fat Trish, which
right.
somebody rightfully points out, maybe don't do that.
Right. And actually, that's one of the things that was kind of amusing and kind of sad too, where she's asking her mother. I don't know. Maybe you guys already mentioned this scene, and if I missed it, I'm sorry. But where she's asking her if she knew who might have it in for her and her friends, and she's like, "Oh no one. We get along great with everybody, Well, maybe, And she starts naming these people. And some of them, she was using the nasty nicknames that they use. Oh, there was the earlier scene where they were saying nicknames of people, and Jamie's just kind of cringing at all these bad nicknames. But then the part where, like, the mother's just naming off all these people, like, that might have a grievance against them. And it's like, and she's sitting there going, and really? And you're just now realizing that this many people have issues with you.
There's actually kind of a parallel to The Blackening in a way, if you look at it, because there's a lot of similarities to some of the trauma that the killer went through. I'm not going to go too far because I don't want to ruin The Blackening for people who haven't watched it. Which, by the way, if you haven't watched it, it is probably one of my favorite films of 2023 when it comes to slasher films. It was hilarious, but still, I saw some similarities there as well.
I can see that. I can see that.
It is actually pretty similar. You're right. Without going too much into The Blackening. What I appreciated kind of about that being the key to why is the killer after these people, like they basically like got Trish drunk and then let her drive home like distraught after like picking on her pretty much.
Yeah.
And they're pretty directly responsible for that accident. Like they more or less straight up killed her themselves. Like,
right. They knew she was shit-faced, and they had been picking on her, and they let her drive. Yeah. But again, the two guys genuinely thought it was more because she was a girl than because she was drunk. And it's like...
Yeah, that was fucked up, too.
Yeah.
That they clean it up later and, don't believe that anymore, like, later in life. But at the same time, it's just kind of like, oh, this was so... These bad attitudes are just so common in, well, my favorite podcast, Chapo Trap House, like, in one of their movie review or, like, in one of their, like, historical, like, breakdown episodes, they were talking about, like, the lives of, like, former presidents. And I think it was the episode where they're talking about like George Washington died because they were just like tapping him like a maple tree because they thought draining out blood would like make him less sick. And one of the hosts said, God, past just sucked so bad. Like, past sucked so bad. And that's, that holds true here.
Yeah, bloodletting killed a lot of people, including, Washington. It probably was one of the things that killed Mozart. It killed a lot of people. Because people didn't know how blood worked. They didn't understand things like infection. And then the phrase, it seemed like a good idea at the time, comes to mind.
Yeah,
when you're using ancient Greece,
like they didn't know like alcohol.
Actually, I recently finished reading a book that was great. And it was called Quackery, A Brief History of the Worst Ways to Cure Everything. And they definitely had a chapter on bloodletting in there. But it's very interesting.
Like brain removal or something. But well, anyway, I mean that ends up being the we find out in the next scene. So I'm just going to spoil like slightly early. So the killer ended up being Doug, who was the principal in the future. Like he was Trisha's boyfriend, and nobody really gave him like a second look because he was just kind of like. No, he was just like dorky and unpopular, and people would make fun of him for it's like, oh, you like computers, nerd, and nobody really suspected him. Like even her dad, even like her teen dad, is like, whoa, he beat me up, and he was like kind of embarrassed. He was embarrassed about it.
I mean, dude's tall as shit, and again, we learned that he took 8 years of karate, so that's if you.
Yeah, it was that scene
when
she breaks into that dude's van to try and catch him as the killer, and he's like, "Don't steal my Nintendo games," and then he comes in and talks about the karate experience. The other guy, I was like, "Okay, that's the killer." And that was the last thing because I had suspected him earlier, but seeing that was the last piece for me.
Yeah.
For me, I kind of let him off I had the same thought in that scene, but I had sort of let him off the hook because it didn't look like his nose was hurt. And that would have been like the day before that she cracked his nose hard enough for like a bunch of blood to come out the way it did. So I thought he would be like visibly injured. Although I suppose that would have been too dead of a giveaway, you know what I mean?
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, the nose does have a lot of blood vessels that are literally right at the surface. And you can bleed pretty profusely without leaving a permanent thing. But I know what you mean. Like, if she had cracked the killer's nose in a way to where it would have broken or something like that, then yeah, you would have seen something the next day.
Or at least like a scratch or something. Yeah. I mean, I get nosebleeds just purely because it's the winter, and so I mean, I know your face your nose can just bleed when it wants to, but I mean, taking like a hard shot to the nose like that, like I would have thought there would at least be like a little bit of a mark, because how it's worked for me.
I didn't even think to look at that, to be honest. I wasn't looking for that.
Everybody, they were like red herring. Fuck, I don't know how to say that. Everyone they were doing that for in the movie, after that fight scene in the cabin, like I was paying really close attention to everybody's noses. Like, okay, somebody.
See, I kept thinking, whenever I see red herring and I think about this, I'm thinking about a pup called Scooby-Doo, where you actually had a character called Red Herring. That was literally the red herring for every episode, except for one where he actually did it. How we learn things as kids.
Right.
Well, there was a Sherlock Holmes adventure dealing with a red herring as well. So does go back that far.
Right.
The one thing, whenever I think of the term red herring, though, I do just always remember Clue. Communism is just a red herring, which apparently it's a real thing again now, and I have to pay attention to it, which is annoying. But at any rate, so we get our last scene where we finally go into our third act where everybody is finally taking this completely seriously, and they rally up a plan to catch the killer. So I guess Marissa is known for doing like actual blowjobs in the haunted house. Like that was a good joke earlier in the movie. It's like, as they call, I always liked Lurch, which is their nickname for the creepy kid with the van. So he works at the boardwalk, and one time he caught me going down on some guy in the haunted dollhouse, and he didn't rat me out. And it was just kind of stands there. It's like, what? If you go into some place called the haunted dollhouse, it's your fault if you see something you didn't want to see.
Yeah.
Well,
I did.
Fair point.
I did like that. Yeah.
I am convinced.
And that was a creepy ass dollhouse. Oh my god, that was like.
Where were the dolls? It was just like a haunted house.
It was definitely a more creepy and impressive attempt than what I have usually seen in the haunted house thing,
It was giving me a lot of Hellfest vibes.
Yeah.
It really was. Like I like when they're going over the plan. Like they give her like the rape alarm that Jamie's mom gave her before she left the house. Way back in the beginning. And it's like, okay, and then Randy is like, but what if the killer slits her throat before she has a chance to press the rape whistle? And like Marissa's just like, what the fuck? She's just like really upset by that suggestion.
Well, and then of course that's what ends up happening. But I did like though that they tried to. I think it was Jamie tried to make her feel better by going, well, he stabs this victim 16 times, so you'll probably have time or something like that. And she's like, you're not making me feel better. But yeah, it does. It ends up being exactly that. That instead of stabbing her first, like it seems has always been his MO, he slits the throat first. And it just
as she's like dying and like going down, and she's just like mashing the button, and it's like I like
did get to use it.
Well, I liked the implication that Randy thought that her voice had to work for her to press the button.
Okay.
Which is why he's just so dumb.
Well, I mean, if it's they call it a whistle. So that would make sense in a sense.
Or I think they did call it like a rape alarm, and I just accidentally called it a whistle. I can't remember if they called it a whistle in the scene. Like that's a good thing on my part.
I can't remember either. I felt like I don't know.
But anyway, like their plan kind of worked. But they run into the sheriff's daughter. Like this is on Halloween, so she's like there in a costume. She's like a Grim Reaper, which again with like the misdirection of who we think the killer is.
Actually, it was a pretty cool costume.
She looked great, yeah.
And then we find out that her dad actually hooked her up with a real site. It's like, yeah.
Like the killer comes after Marissa, and they're all posing as like props in the haunted house, and they kind of all just jump him at once, and he starts to get the upper hand until the sheriff's daughter like comes up from behind him and just nails him with the scythe. And just I laughed pretty hard. Like, that thing is real? It's like, my dad gave it to me. Yeah, there's a killer on the loose. It's like, oh, well, all right. I'll allow it. And they take it off, and it is indeed Doug. And he's the locket that they were making fun of him throughout the movie for has Trisha's picture in it. So I thought that was
Okay, I just randomly, I was going through the quotes and I was reminded of that Randy doesn't become suddenly smarter as he's an adult. Because they have that scene just after the murder of Pam, where he's trying to help the kids, and he's doing like this little talk, and when he's the gym teacher, and he's like, yeah, so the first thing you want to do if you see the killer is run. Remember, avoid the knife, keep your life. And I just groaned when I heard that. I'm like, oh my. You can imagine what the kids were thinking. But it's like, now that I just saw that line, and I was like, yeah, he never really did get all that much smarter, did he?
Indeed.
Right.
Okay, so I guess we're right after Doug was revealed, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. Which, of course, once they managed to actually take him out pretty well, but after that, they think it's all done when the next killer shows up. I believe it's when they're trying to go home, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because did we even mention that yeah, I think we did, that her best friend actually figured out that that metal piece had to be attached to her. Well, she had actually built a backup time machine. And once she figured out the metal contraption to attach to it, I guess it seemed it looks like the podcast dude and her kind of got together, and they were about to go back, but I guess something happened, and that's when the killer the second killer. Oh, what is that? I think that might be.
There we go. We got it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
hearing it.
Yeah. That's your mic. That's going.
It's my mic that's going? Or
No, it's
Dustin's?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing it must have crapped out or something.
I'm going to.
Well, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's go back when the killer it comes back is where we are. I think
Right.
they somehow end up at that quantum drop.
Well, that was the plan for. That's where the past. What's her name? The best friend's mom. She had built a new time machine in that because they figured out that would be where the enough energy could be generated. So that's where that was the plan.
Didn't her friend's mom figure out how to make this machine?
Yeah.
That seemed like it was smaller than the photo booth machine.
Yeah, it was basically what's that?
Okay. Wasn't sure if Dustin's thing was actually going to be making noise again or not. Yeah, it's making noise still. I don't know what's going on, Dustin, but
Yeah.
Need to cut that. Yeah.
yeah. 1 second here. Okay.
But yeah, we have quite a battle when it comes to that last thing when they're in that kind of centrifuge looking thing and doing some stuff, and then of course we have the other killers show up because they have to use that quantum drop in order to create enough force for the second time machine to really work. And they make a good point of saying, you better be in the center of this thing by the time it takes off, or else you're going to explode. So you almost think that the mother's going to end up getting killed, because when they reveal the killer this time, it's, of course, our nerdy guy who is the one who's been essentially telling all of the stories, and he's doing this because he's trying to keep the image alive so that he can continue doing his little investigations and stuff, but and somehow managed to get as strong as he did. But they have their tussle, and the mother gets thrown out of the thing before it gets too far off base, and the other two have this fight with her in the center and him trying to kick her out of the center. But she manages to kick him against the wall when he's not basically when it's going too fast, and he sure enough does explode.
Which they had actually foreshadowed earlier in the scene with Lurch and Doug, where they were talking about the villains or the bad guys in this one video game just going up in a puff of like pink smoke or whatever they say, or like pink. So like I'm not sure why I can't think of exactly what they said and why I can't think of a good way to describe it. But basically, what happens to him is what happened in that video game, apparently.
Yes, indeed.
And it was kind of interesting to see that. But yeah, apparently I guess he had killed Amelia and stolen the time machine. And that's how he got, back there. The mother, Lauren, had set the return time to a few hours earlier, which I guess it turned out to have not been that big of a deal after all, since they got rid of the killer in the past. But it was interesting.
So am I back?
Oh, you sound good now.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, thank God. Okay, StreamYard just the page like suddenly froze and then shut down, and I had to unplug the mic a couple times.
Yeah, I think you may have had the mic like maybe partially plugged or something, because nothing was coming through but static. But
yeah, it was really weird. But anyway, the only I'm not sure when it started messing up. So the only point I wanted to make that I thought was like super important about like the Doug reveal was that like his like killer motivation I thought was a really cool callback to stuff like Graduation Day and Final Exam, like some of like the lesser known like 80s slashers where the killer was inspired to do like murders based off like some high school kind of thing that happened like that. So I thought that was a good callback to kind of war history there.
So I always think of there's one, I cannot think of the name of it, but it's that one where that guy gets scarred and he invites all the kids back later to the high school when he sets all the booby traps and so on.
Slaughter High, I want to say.
Slaughter High.
Return to Slaughter High?
Return to Slaughter High, yes. exactly it. That was a good one. Also, I think that was that 80s or 90s.
That was 80s.
I'm pretty sure that's 80s. It's
I
on.
believe that
Yeah.
also was a best run title.
Very good film. As far as
Graduation Day was pretty good too. That was I think it was something along the lines of like some girl like died during like a track meet because they pushed her too hard, and like the boyfriend ended up being the killer in that, with pretty much like this similar motivations to Doug. Like it really reminded me of that movie quite a lot, so I just appreciated that. But yeah, so we are in the quantum drop now, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Quantum drop. I love that ride. It's been called different things over time too.
Yeah,
in various places.
we had an equivalent one to King's Dominion. I don't know if they still have it, but they did have one, and I used to love that when I was a kid. I was like, it was fun. Like when you could just sticking to the wall and the floor would drop out from under you, and it was like, it just felt really fun.
But that was really cool. Cool that the killer, once he was inside, he stood up and then started walking towards the victim. Her mother.
Which, given the centrifugal force of that thing, he must have been pretty strong.
Well,
Yeah.
whatever stunt guy was playing in that dude's place was definitely strong.
That was so wild when he was like walking along the wall. Like, I don't know if that would have been, even if you were really strong, I don't know if you could do that.
I'm not sure. It would be.
Well, it's definitely not safe.
No, it's not.
You're surprised.
I don't suggest you kiddies do this at home.
I do remember, like, when I would do that ride, like, I would try kind of peeling the arm off the wall and whatnot, and it was not easy. So it's like standing up at your full height. I really wonder about that. He might have been able to crawl on his hands and knees. That would have made more sense, I think. But standing up, I don't know. But it did make for an interesting visual.
Yes, it did. And then, of course, when he got to the center and he said, "Oh, I've got both knives."
He was just trying to taunt her, like, I have both knives. Yeah, after she stabbed him and like left one in his like guts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
like,
wasn't that nice for her?
idiot.
Yeah, I mean, and he could use them both at the same time, but it did not help him in the end.
Nope, it definitely did not.
Also, like, what kind of a chump would, I suppose that the information needed to, you would have had to have talked to like the high school kids, like in as much detail as Jamie did to learn why the murders were happening. Like, I don't think it's the way that investigation was conducted by the original sheriff. It was so fucking careless, and so many things were just completely ignored. That could have like been tied to it. Like, it makes perfect sense why Doug had like, he killed who he was after and then just quit. So it's to me, it's kind of like this dude whose podcast is like obsessed with these murders. Like, he couldn't figure it out, but at the same time, I can still see how maybe he really couldn't have. Because unless you knew about like the accident with Trish and Doug being like really athletic and her boyfriend, you probably could not have put this together. What happened? So at first I was like, I had no idea Doug was the original killer. And it's like, I would have thought at least you would have had maybe like a 5% suspicion. So, you know, kind of made me think, it's like, wow, your podcast must suck if you can't figure anything out.
Well, yeah, you get the impression that he's, you know, he's definitely not a top tier podcaster. You one thing that is, I don't know if we've touched on yet, but it's a running thing in the film, is that he clearly is envious of his old man, who is like an actual journalist and who's won awards for his journalism. And here he has this, I don't know, you get the impression that he has some ratings for his podcast. I mean, he's given these murder tours that people actually show up for in costume, so he has an audience. But
and he won 5 Podsy Awards, whatever those are.
Whatever those are.
That was a fun joke early on. It's like, I won 5 Podsy. You know, my dad likes your dad. He says he's on track to win another Pulitzer. It's like, well, I've won 5 Podsy Awards. It's not the same thing. And he just kind of looks hurt.
Yeah.
I did think it was kind of funky that he would come to her with some kind of note saying that her mother came to him and she never heard of them getting together or whatnot. Although I do think she had a conversation with her dad about it, and he said that he actually had a thing for her at one point in time before they were together or whatnot. But I don't know.
Yeah, they explained that like there were texts on her mom's phone, like to Chris, like found for doing stuff with his podcast. And her father explained it to her that was basically like, podcast guy was the only one still trying to investigate the murders, and it really seriously bothered their mom that there was no resolution on it. So she was basically still trying to like solve the case with the only person who still gave a damn.
Well, and again, I think it was mentioned a few minutes ago that Doug did what he wanted, and then he was done. You know, he was ready to move on because he had done what he wanted to do. But what Pam had no way of knowing that. You know, she knew that her 3 best friends had been killed, and she didn't know that they were killed for something that was where she had not been there, and that's why she was spared. She didn't know that. So it's kind of like she spent her whole life waiting for the axe to fall, as it were, because how would she know any better? And so, I could understand that she'd be a little anxious for resolution and a little overprotective as a parent as well, you know?
The only thing is, who actually killed her mom to begin with? Was it the podcast?
It was the podcaster in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. Like he confessed during that final scene in the Shining Drop. He confessed that it's like, I killed your mom to revive interest in the murders. You know, the killer
he killed her for ratings.
Michael Myers.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So, which made it also kind of like he's not like a small dude, but he's like this, balding old nerd. Like it is kind of surprising to me, after that reveal that he was able to like beat her mom in that battle, considering like how much damage she was putting out. So that was kind of my one like disbelief sort of moment.
Oh, that geeky looking dude actually was able to accomplish the.
I was able to take out like karate master mom,
Yeah, that's a little bit further reach than suspension of belief that I'm entirely willing to throw down for that, but I guess for the movie's sake, I guess.
I mean, I think it worked, and it's like fine, because you know, it was a pretty like even back and forth battle for a while. But and you know, they probably talked about like all the stuff that like he probably knew where all her weapons and stuff were, because they had been talking about like the murders and like what she had been like doing in the years since. Like I could see that being like an interview or something. It's like, you know, what if the killer ever came back? It's like, well, I have blah blah blah. And you know, maybe not sharing all the details like on the show, but you know, in private she'd probably be like, oh yeah, I have all this stuff. And so he might have known, like, you know, like the hidden guns and knives, like he may have known about all of them.
And who's to say he hasn't been training extensively in the martial arts for, you know, just such an occasion. It also, I don't remember how the battle ended. Honestly, I don't remember the specifics. If it was if it was him overpowering her, or if it was just he got the upper hand.
She kind of got pinned and like had to crawl at one point, and when she was crawling, he got on top of her.
Yeah. So I don't remember exactly what caused the change of fortune. But yeah, if you have a back and forth, sometimes all it takes is a slip up or a mistake or something, you know.
Like you tripped and I didn't let you get back up.
Yeah. He definitely didn't dominate the fight. That would have definitely been I don't know if I could have swallowed that. Yeah.
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 Yeah, but I mean, we had a pretty good battle in the Quantum Drop when, you know, Jamie like finally kills him. You know, and we get some fun moments in there too. I mean, I liked, you know, before she like pushes her mom out at the time of the machine. You know, we get like that little bit of dialogue. It's like, you said there was an important moment with me and you, and Jimmy's just like, you and me have been in here before. And I don't. Did Jamie actually tell like her mom like the story that her dad told her?
No, I don't think so. I think that was as close as she got to doing that.
Yeah, it was just kind of like there were some like genuine tender moments that I kind of liked in this movie, and that was sort of one of them. So I just kind of wanted to call some attention to that, and then like the, you know, action movie line before she like pushes Doug out of the control booth and he splats into the wall. No, not Doug. Damn it! Podcaster's name is Chris. I need to try and remember these things.
Yep.
It's important. You know, before she pushes, you know, podcaster killer away, like, enjoy the ride, and he just like shoots into the wall and like explodes. So this was it was like a satisfying, like, you know, conclusion, you know, as she like successfully and one thing that was kind of nice too is like she did change a significant number. She did change a lot of things, like in the past, like her parents are alive and stuff again, are alive now, and you know whatnot. But you know, she has like an older brother now because, you know, they got together like right after that happened, and they stayed together
because they were very horny.
Who's that? That is your 35-year-old brother. Like, oh,
Jamie. Wait, we're both Jamie? No.
And her name's Colette now, and it's like, oh, well, all right, fine. Like, I personally would be really annoyed by that.
Could you imagine how confusing that would be for like family dinners for the next 20 years? Jamie, yes.
Well, I would, because of the way they described how those memories work, I would think after like a couple of weeks, it would maybe kind of like resolve. It would maybe kind of like go away on its own, but at the same time, it would be so insufferable for that time period.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, Lauren, I think it was, had made up a notebook for her, kind of Cliff's notes on some of the changes to expect. And so I guess that's kind of that was kind of an interesting way to end it there. And you get a few of the Cliff's notes as it's going toward the credits. It might have been interesting to have a few more, but on the other hand, she wouldn't have been able to know all of them anyway. But yeah, some pretty extensive changes.
The scrapbook of her life that she should probably never leave the house with, not knowing little bits of her life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we get that kind of like Breakfast Club Where Are They Now sort of montage at the end where it explains like all the things that were changed. And like that one thing on the IMDb trivia said, like it mentions, Chris never became a podcaster, and after he killed his dad on air, and for seeing his dad killed on air, like he went on some sort of, he went on like a Zen quest or whatever.
Right.
And then the point, it's like, well, if he never became a podcaster, then, how would she know who he was, But I think that's kind of more of a like specific nitpick, and I don't really care, because it's the way that they present like how like time flows in this movie, like it still makes sense to me that they would need to like add that for her. So, maybe in like a couple weeks, like she'll forget what podcast, but for now, I mean, it's necessary, especially for the audience too. Because I think there's a degree of compromise you have to make so that people understand what's happening. So, I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with the way it all resolved. So yeah, that's it's my very extra wordy breakdown.
Okay, so, let's take this into production then.
Well, for production, like everything in this movie was pretty well done. Like the little bits of blood and gore that we do have, pretty convincing. When Doug damn it, I keep trying to call him Doug. When Chris explodes in the ride, like after getting like sent flying into the wall, he does just kind of burst into like a CGI pink mist. But I mean, they even make that like a comment, like, "Oh, pink mist." So I think that's the only effect in the movie that I would really take any kind of issue with, because it was kind of like, meh, that looks a little phony. But the rest of it, all pretty good. So that's kind of what I have to say about like the production. I think the production was great. And tied in with the production too, I think would be the music, which the music budget for like the licensing had to be a significant part of their budget, I bet, because I don't know if those were like popular 80s songs, but they sounded like they would be popular 80s songs. So I guess we're just kind of like mashing the two sections together a little bit here. Like, what are somebody else's takeaways on those?
Was there an original song for this one?
I don't think there was. I know. So I was trying to get a hold of a soundtrack for this, and there are two, like there are with a lot of movies. There is an actual score for this movie, like a separate score, and then there's the licensed 80s songs, which are kind of overwhelming in comparison. Like, sort of takes a minute to remember that it takes a minute to remember that, to notice that, oh, there is like actual like unique to this movie music in like an orchestral score, but for the most part it's hard to remember that it's there through all like the really loud sequences with the licensed music, just because there's so much more, I guess, kind of in your face. like, I don't know, it's one of those movies where the score like fits the movie really so well that you don't really notice that it's there. And then like the licensed songs are meant to be noticed, which is why they're used in scenes. So it's
Unfortunately, IMDb only comes up with one particular song, New Order, Bizarre Love Triangle. As far as actual 80s songs.
Well, let me
Yeah.
let me go to because on YouTube I was able to find playlists of the soundtrack, and it took a lot of digging, but I did find a listing for like a original film score, which has not been released in any format as of yet, but it is out there. So,
well, the composer of the actual composing music was Michael Andrews.
Yeah, I'm talking about the OST. Like that's the OST like / score.
Yeah, he did the music behind Donnie Darko.
That makes sense, actually. Okay. Yeah, Michael Andrews. So I found a playlist, Totally Killer Unreleased Motion Picture Soundtrack by Score Station. So yeah, the score is on YouTube. All these tracks are very short though, which is probably why music isn't very prevalent. Like they're all like under 90 seconds.
He also did the score to Roadrunner, the Anthony Bourdain film. That's kind of a totally different movie. The Big Sick, Neighbors 2, Daddy's Home, Neighbors. An interesting assortment. Bridesmaids. Okay. So,
Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Oh, really? Ha ha. That's one we'll have to cover one of these days.
Bridesmaid, Bad Teacher.
A few of those, actually.
The Heat.
But yeah, the music, the songs we mentioned before, but I do think the songs that they used in this were mostly well used. I think they did a really good job compiling the soundtrack for that nice 80s vibe.
Yeah, I finally found it. So The World Is Ours, The Werewolves, Vague Flesh, Kali, what is that? Venus, Bananarama, Lizzie Borden and the Axes, Bob Crawford, New Order, Bizarre Love Triangle, yeah, there's that. Lady in Red, Chris de Burgh, Say You're the Only One, Sierra, Under Control, Brian Carr, Killing Moon, Echo and the Bunnymen, Ulti Music Play, Shannon. Those are all 80s, right? Pretty sure they are. Like, why wouldn't they be? Oh well. Either way, like the music is great. I thought was pretty like spot on and like appropriate and great, and like did well at establishing the mood. And the production, like there weren't really any holes. Like I think if you want to like really nitpick the production, like aside from like a couple of like really random like CGI assisted things like the pink mist like explosion. So that was another fun thing too. The creepy kid, like because of things resolving differently, like he started a video game company and like successful instead of just being like the
right.
creepy.
I think didn't he call it like Pink Mist Games or something like
that? They did call it Pink Mist Games.
That was the word I was looking for earlier, was mist. Okay, yeah. Because like where when Chris exploded into the mist, it was a nice callback to that. And I was like, found that amusing.
It's like, oh, it is Pink Mist. But I mean, that was kind of a fun thing, you know. Give him something, yeah. After like people kind of like reached out to him a little bit more.
Okay.
Did
anyone else have anything on the
train of thought? Oh, right. The point I was trying to make. The killer's mask looked maybe a little bit too like clean and perfect. I think was the one like kind of attempt at a complaint I would have about production. Like it seemed a little bit too. It seemed like something that he maybe wouldn't have necessarily been able to just go buy, like not custom, like for that period. Like it was a little too nice. Like that's the only thing I can think of that would be like a critique of production. And even then, it's kind of a stupid thing to complain about. So, but I want to be sure I covered all the bases. So, does anyone have anything else?
No, good.
As far as production goes, I thought the production looked pretty darn cool. I mean, I thought the effects of the time travel was pretty decent. I mean, the I do think that the attitudes of the time was, something that was captured really well. I think that the where they filmed or whatnot, wherever they filmed the high school scenes, it looked pretty darn close to that time period and things of that nature. The music went well with the film, and yeah. Did we want to go through favorite scenes or whatnot?
I'll just kick us off with that, I guess. So my favorite scene was the like cabin attack with that like song playing in the background, and it was, I don't know, it was kind of the highlight of the movie for me because it had kind of all the things I like about horror. Like it was kind of goofy, but also like really grim and nasty. It was, I don't know, it's hard to describe exactly what stuff like that like makes me feel, but I was really happy with it. It was
okay.
So that's my favorite.
Okay. What about you, Brandon?
I'm trying to think. I like that last part where they're in that gravity thing. I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay. What about you, Tammy?
Well, my favorite character was, Jamie was her name. And I think I liked the whole big fight in the end, inside that,
Quantum drop?
yeah, that thing. Forgot what it was called.
Well, it's called differently in each carnival.
Well, here it's the quantum drop.
Yeah, here's the quantum drop, but
yeah, I think that whole thing I thought was really, really cool.
okay. What about you, Jake?
I'm actually not sure what my favorite part would be. I was just trying to think, and I'm not sure I've really got a standout like this is the best one. Probably some of Jamie's reactions when she goes back to the past. Like her reaction when she's dealing with the school secretary who just doesn't even, or like, I don't know if we mentioned the one where she and Lauren tried to requisition the quantum drop to turn it into a time machine. And they tell the guy like, hey, we're here from city or county or whoever. You're going to need to shut this down for, and he's like, wait, all you needed to say is something like, all you need to say is Ned, I think his name was Ned, go to lunch or something like that. Like that was his reaction. Like he didn't give a shit. He was just like,
Quantum draft comes down, I go on break.
yeah, exactly. I just thought those kind of moments were pretty funny. Lauren's reaction about the time traveling was really cool. I did enjoy that. Her explanation of why she was completely unfazed. I was like, okay, I can get that. So I might go with those. I guess this being a slasher film, though, you guys probably want to hear favorite kills or whatever. I guess that scene with the waterbed was pretty cool.
Okay.
Like, you do feel bad for Tiffany in that scene too, because that's a long death. Like, oof.
It was a long juxtaposition to get to that a moment too, because well, not totally, but she kept messing up the killer's plans a little bit too, and I don't think the killer entirely knew that entirely, because he was just going after people just because. But he did have a reason behind killing those that he was killing. So I did like the myself. I did like that cabin in the woods when we're in the murder mansion. Oh my god,
We're in the murder cabin.
She's freaking out and shit. I do love her reactions to everything. I mean, the minute she put on the gym outfit, she was like, "God, what are we wearing?" I mean, I feel like I'm in a Hooters restaurant or some shit,
Are you Hooters waitresses? Like, I guess they are kind of short. I never really paid attention. I don't know.
Well, that's why I was thinking that at that point in time,
I got her point now, but
because our parents try to make sure that we have like all these manners and whatnot, and dressed appropriately, and in this day and age, and so when you go back to that kind of time period, and people have low cut dresses, things are above the knee, people dressed a little bit more sluttier back in the 80s. Sometimes I guess the nowadays prude would go back and be like, okay, why are they wearing these things? This feels like I'm exposed, that type of thing. But I do like the end thing in that quantum drop too, when he gets up on the side of that thing and just pretty much walks his way over to his victim. And that is pretty fucking amazing. I mean, I like that part. I think that's my favorite piece in the whole thing. So, other than that, did anyone else have anything else to add? Alrighty. Well, let's go around and first off, those out there listening, thank you for listening. We had a blast talking about this film. Let's go around and tell everyone who we are. So, Dustin.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking around. This was a pretty long one for us, everybody. So thank you. Hopefully you learned something or had a good time. So I'm Cryptaxis, for the Crypt of Horrors. I have a YouTube channel where I show off the horror movie stuff I used to find around town. And I have an Instagram for pretty much the same purpose. I'm trying to get more uploads done. Not going too great, but we're going to try. So you can find me on Twitter or whatever it's called now as Cryptaxis, where I hang out pretty frequently, and you can just talk to me about movies on there. And with that, I'm going to head out. So later, everyone.
Good night.
Catch you later.
All right.
Alrighty, Tammy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm David's fiance. I go on this podcast and another and talk with others about movies, and I have my own collection, and it's interesting to hear everybody else's opinions, and at this time that's about it right now.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right, I'm Kotobukijake. I am the co-host on occasion of the YouTube page SeptumSin versus the World. Also, been largely sorry, it is rather late here, so I keep pretty busy most of the time, but I do try to make some time to enjoy my movies and such, and including ones to join these fine folks. This was a movie doubles for another ongoing project that we do, which is the Versus Awards. Is still early going for next year's ceremony, but each new movie we get to add is fun, and kind of cool for Dustin to actually pick 2 2023 choices. It's a fun one to talk about. I look forward to seeing the other one next week.
Yeah. Huh. Wow.
Ready. What about you, Brandon?
SeptumSin versus the World. Right now, we give weekly anime updates about what anime is coming out. And in a week from now-ish, we'll be covering Sketchbook Full Colors for Anime Anticlimax. But there is a little bit of a preview of some of the background stuff for our upcoming film, Amityville Webcam. As a matter of fact, I have just managed to upload another cut of the film, and I'm just trying to shave off the final touches of it. So my hope is that it will be done soon. Will it be ready to show anytime soon? Who knows?
Alrighty. Is that pretty much it then?
Yep. Five Nights at Freddy's next week.
Alrighty. And my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on this fantabulous journey that we've been having. It's been a blast. And if you haven't seen the movie, go out and see it. Like, share, and subscribe. And we are definitely going to have a fun time next week. But I do moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we do go on every Sunday, do kind of similar things, and hope that you show up, give us a listen, because this next week on Sunday we're going to do Meet Joe Black, and it's going to be exciting. So I haven't seen it in a while, and it should be a good discussion. Hopefully the discussion isn't as long as the movie. But that being said, hopefully you let us know down in the comments what you thought, and everyone say good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.